We're here for the FCM Collective, Creating Inclusive and Equitable Municipalities. What stage are you at? My name is Salima Ibrahim. I'm the Chief of Staff at the City of Edmonton and absolutely thrilled to be your moderator today. I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement that we use at the City of Edmonton, and would ask that you reflect on the ones that you use in your various cities at this time. So the City of Edmonton acknowledges the traditional land on which we reside is in Treaty 6 territory. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territories for centuries, such as the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of one of the largest communities of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all people who come together from across the world to share Edmonton as a home. Together, we call upon our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and future generations. So before we begin, I've got a few housekeeping items to please review. This session does offer simultaneous interpretation. To hear this session in French, simply click on the globe icon in the bottom tab and select the French option. If you don't select a language, your default is going to be English audio. Our focus for the discussion today is on our panelists, who I'll introduce in just a moment. I'll be directing questions and topics to them throughout the discussion, as well as adding my perspective and experience to this conversation. At the top of our discussion, we will be inviting all of you to provide responses to a few polling questions. This is going to help us shape the dialogue today and ensure that you are getting the most out of today's session. Those are going to automatically appear on your screen in a couple of minutes. And finally, we ask that comments in the chat please stay respectful. We are going to try and have time for questions at the end, and we will get to as many as we can. And finally, the session is being recorded and will be available on demand on the FCM website. So if you have any of your colleagues who can't make today, feel free to point them towards the FCM website. So with that, let's start. I am so pleased to be with all of you today and the FCM for today's exciting topics. As local leaders, you know how important it is to ensure we cultivate and foster inclusive and equitable communities. And today you're going to hear from 3 panelists representing different parts of Canada on their own journeys to become more inclusive. They're going to talk about their experiences when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They will talk about their own specific communities, and we will also touch upon some of the anti-racist efforts that are going on across Canada. So no surprise to anybody, Canada's economic future is very much tied to this idea that everyone can succeed and thrive. Yet too many people still face significant barriers to success, which have been highlighted over the past 2 years, as we've seen that vulnerability to COVID-19 is not shared equally, with the majority of impacts being borne by our most marginalized. The past 2 years have also highlighted the need to have conversations around racism and discrimination in a very authentic manner, and really highlighted, I think, the importance of cities, given how given how close we are to our own communities, and what we all need to do in order to actually build communities where everybody feels included. So I'm incredibly happy that FCM is leading this conversation today. And they are an incredible partner who is committed to supporting the development of building inclusive and equitable communities with policies that work for everyone. So with that, FCM is pleased to be working in collaboration with our partner Shaw Communications to host the discussion today. Shaw was a very eager partner with FCM on this session, and we are extremely grateful for their support. Before we introduce our panelists and get into our discussion, we would like to thank Hardev Burke, Government Relations Director with Shaw. And we will give him the floor to say a few words to talk about their work within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and why this was important to their organization.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today for this important conversation on creating inclusive and equitable municipalities in Canada. Shaw is proud to support this conversation through our long-standing partnership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. At Shaw, we truly believe that municipal leaders across the country are at the forefront of creating more diverse and inclusive communities that allow all Canadians to feel at home. We pursue this same mission at Shaw and work to create an environment that empowers people to bring their whole selves to work by embracing diversity and celebrating different perspectives. Shaw is constantly working to build an inclusive workplace and measuring belonging among our team by using 3 strategies. 1, values and leadership. Our leaders are empowered to create an inclusive environment to nurture a growth mindset. 2, conscious equity. Workplace diversity is promoted by awareness, policies, and processes. And 3, we connect, celebrate, and elevate. We embrace and empower the diverse communities within and outside of Shaw to raise awareness and celebrate the uniqueness of us all with the opportunity to learn and grow as committed allies. Shaw also supports the diversity of our people by embracing the idea of employee resource groups. These groups are run by employees with the support of senior leaders at Shaw and encourage everyone to step up and have their voices heard. We currently have 4 employee resource groups: Accessibility at Shaw, Pride at Shaw, Spectrum at Shaw, and Women at Shaw. These employee resource groups create resources, events, and platforms for people within Shaw to have their voices heard. We also administer an annual employment equity survey, which is a critical tool for us to understand the diversity and makeup of our organization. At Shaw, we believe a more diverse workforce leads to stronger performance. It's also smart business. We want our employees to reflect the customers we serve and the communities we live in. Our goal is to reflect the richness of all our communities and for our employees to feel a sense of belonging. We want to leverage our differences and bring our whole selves to work. So thank you so much to the FCM for hosting this conversation today and to all of you for attending. There's a great group of panelists here and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. So with that, I'll hand it back to you and I hope everyone enjoys the conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Shaw Communications, for sponsoring today's event. So our panelists today come to you from Victoria, from Halifax, and from Ottawa. And I'd like to start off by introducing Charmarque Dubois. He was a Victoria City Councillor and United Nations Human Rights Fellow. He strongly believes that city leaders ought to focus not only on service delivery, but on efforts that create a sense of participation and belonging to the benefit of all the community members. Charmarque, super happy to have you here today. We also have Councillor Lindell Smith, who is a lifelong resident of North End, Halifax. He has a proven commitment to working with his community and has dedicated himself to serving it. In keeping with his concern for the whole community and its diverse needs, and in response to the rapid growth and changes within the neighborhood, Lindell, along with other community members, started the One North End project, which I think we're going to hear more about during today's session. And from Ottawa, we've got Sheila James. Sheila James has over 20 years in the EDI field and is currently a diversity and inclusion programs and project specialist at the City of Ottawa, where she initiated an innovative strategic hiring process. She is a former senior strategic advisor for Canada Council for the Arts, where she managed the Equity Office for 10 years, contributing to the transformation of the country's cultural landscape. She's the award-winning author and founder and executive director of a sole proprietorship called DEVI, Consultation and Strategies, that creates interventions and solutions to create equitable governance and representative workplaces. So with that, super happy to have our panelists here today. And we're gonna officially kick off the session. So, the first question that I think is really important, just in terms of setting a bit of a baseline, is why is it important to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework? Curious to hear from our panelists what surprised you about the process as you developed the framework, and what challenges can you share with our participants today, and potentially some solutions that went along with those challenges. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila, please, to kick us off.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. And I just wanted to start by saying that I'm joining you from Ottawa, which is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. And we do honor the peoples of the Algonquin Nation who have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. And the City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. So I wanted to begin with that because I think at the heart of any equity framework or any advancement around social justice in our municipalities is the Reconciliation Action Plan. And I think that is really the root or the heart of what we do at the city, because, you know, it's really important that we all are living on this land. And except for Indigenous people, we are all, you know, visitors or immigrants or settlers to this land. So to answer your question, why is it important to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework? First of all, it's very important, I think, for all municipalities to do this because a framework sets out your definitions, your understandings of all of the terms related to EDI, all of the various approaches and specific strategies, and it can also set your priorities. Now, having said that, the City of Ottawa is in the process of developing an equity framework, and this would bring together our numerous external and internal initiatives within a cohesive approach. So the idea is that it will be designed to guide our work through complex time and issues. And as you probably many of you know, Ottawa being the capital city of Canada, can be in the news, can be in the national news often. And so an equity framework will help us, you know, in terms of having that cohesive approach that can be understandable to everybody. We do have two major guides that direct us in our work, and that is the equity and diversity policy, and that's aligned to our human rights legislation and accountability. And we also have a corporate diversity and equity, our corporate diversity and inclusion plan, which we call the CDIP. And I'm going to show you, just a second here, I'm going to show you our corporate diversity and inclusion plan. This is an infographic. And this plan was approved by our senior leadership team in January of 2020. And we have a different plan generally for each term of council. And it has high level objectives, which are strategic objectives, and that is towards a representative workforce and an inclusive workplace. And stemming from those objectives, we have three pillars, and that is our recruitment and hiring, which is eliminating barriers to hiring at the city, retention and promotion. And this is ensuring that all our diverse employees have proportional opportunity for promotion, but also we want them to stay at the city. So making sure that they have what they need, professional development, so on, to stay at the city. And then finally, we have another pillar is to ensure we have an environment where it is safe for people to self-identify. And that's not only self-identifying in a questionnaire, but it is also the idea of self-identifying where you are, you know, when you're working in your meetings, so that you can be very, you be your authentic self, right? From there, we have five focus areas which are built on best practices. And these are outreach and recruitment, partnerships and engagement, learning and awareness, accountability, governance and policy review, and data management and workforce analytics. And I'll just pull that down now. And that gives you an idea, I think, of what it means right at the city to, how do I unscreen? There we go. So that has tells you basically what we do at the city in order to have a large, you know, framework around the work we do. I'm just aware of time. We do have some outward facing strategies such as the Reconciliation Action Plan, a women and gender equity strategy, as well as we're developing our anti-racism strategy. So those are the things that we're doing. And there are challenges, of course, whenever we do advance equity and diversity in our communities. And that's because not everybody believes in that, right? Whether it's residents or whether it's employees, it's a matter of talking about how equity, diversity, and inclusion is a benefit for all of us, right? It drives change, it drives innovation, it drives business, as we heard. And I think that those are all things that are important to think about in our large framework idea.
Great. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Lindell. I think that's actually a really good segue because he's going to talk a little bit about what this looks like from the ground up. So Lindell, over to you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and happy to be here. Lindell Smith, counselor in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Halifax Regional Municipality. Also, we are on the land of Mi'kmaq, the traditional and then unceded and ancestral land of the Mi'kmaq people. Also recognize the contributions that our African Nova Scotian community has had in Nova Scotia for over 400 years when we landed on the shores. Also, big shout out to the East Coast family I see that are in the chat. Hello to you all. So I'll wear this or have this discussion wearing two hats. So one, my FCM hat as the chair for the Anti-Racism and Equity Committee, and also as the counselor here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So really quickly, in what I'm going to do, so I don't over time or over speaking, I just put a timer on. Really quickly, just to speak on the FCM aspect. So when FCM took on this journey to start the Anti-Racism and Equity Committee, and most folks who are in here who've been part of these discussions heard me say I didn't want to be part of it because I think that we need to look at diversity, inclusion, and equity with not of a check mark, but more of a feeling in wanting to see that actually turn into action. So initially, I declined the offer to support the work because I just wasn't sure that FCM was committed, because there was no framework, there was no groundwork, there was no base. But because of that, we saw very quickly from the leadership of FCM, we needed to create that groundwork, and that only starts when people step up and start to do the groundwork. You can't build a house without the platform or the base. So you can't expect the house to be finished if you don't have that. So really quickly understood that in order to do that work, we need to have folks who have been in there. And here in Halifax, we have an anti-Black racism strategy. We have a diversity inclusion office. We've had African Nova Scotian Affairs office for many, many years. So we've luckily, with the size of the municipality that we are, being just over 5,000 square kilometers in size, and just over 400,000 population, we have a diverse population here in Halifax. But we also have a diverse population when it comes to rural communities, because when you have a 5,000 square kilometer municipality, there is also dynamics when it comes to urban, suburban, and rural. And because of that experience as a counselor and with our communities, it made sense for me to support the work of FCM and lots of difficulties and how do you start that, and really jumping around a bit, but just to cover this, it was really important I felt for me to be there because of the complexities of municipalities like ours, but also outside of our city. So, I'm not sure who is here, but shout out to anyone that might be part of Bridgewater in Lunenburg County here on the East Coast. They started an anti-racism task force in their municipality, and they're just under maybe 10,000 people population in their rural community, but they understood it's important for us to have that lens and for us to do that work because, one, it's important and to talk about equity, diversity, and anti-racism, but they also know that as our rural communities either grow or shrink, depending on where you are, it's important that people feel welcome so they stay, or it's important that people feel welcome so they come. So one of the things that I tell rural communities, it's if you're not starting with an anti-Black racism or an Islamophobia task force or whatever it might be, start with social policy. What is your values? What do you care about? What do you want people to see when they come here? And then you can work your way up to the equity and inclusion and diversity. Because first, before you start doing the work, you need to kind of look, check your heart to see what you care about. So that's usually the feedback I give, is if you're a rural community, really start with thinking of the social issues, and then starting to work your way up to the equity inclusion, because it's all intertwined. So I'll speak a little bit more about that in the next question, but that's kind of the start for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lindell. Charmarke, over to you in Victoria. I'm curious to hear how this type of work is going on the West Coast.
Thank you, Salima, and it's great to be here. Great to see everyone. I just want to first begin that I'm joining you from City of Victoria, also capital city of British Columbia, and showing my respect and gratitude to the Lungquancan people whose traditional territory that I have the privilege today virtually join you, the Songhees and Squamish and Osaanics people. And it's very important to note that also their historical relationship with the land continued to this day. And to those of us who came here as settlers, as migrants, or either in this generation or generation past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, and particularly the transatlantic slave trade, or run from persecution from our homelands. And I don't make this
We might have lost our esteemed colleague.
Oh,
The joys
I
of
thought
tech.
I was frozen.
Were you frozen, Lindell? Okay.
I thought I was. Okay.
Well, that's okay. Why don't we do this? I think the next question is one where Charmarke could probably also add his piece in. So if I see him come back, I'll get him to maybe answer the second question first. But I think what I really took away from question number one is this type of work is really rooted in commitment. And it's commitment from the community, it's commitment from your council, and it's commitment from senior administration. And so with that, I think, maybe I'll turn it over to our panelists to start digging a little deeper in terms of, could you talk to us a little bit about how your community has been involved in the DEI journey? What were some of the challenges? And then, I think what might be really important for this group is—
Sorry, I got cut.
Oh, no, that's okay. You're back. I'm happy to hear that. We had just moved on to question number two, Charmarke, but I was going to throw it over to you and maybe you can answer 1 and 2 together. Does that work?
Yes, let me first, and I don't know where I was cut. I'm sorry. It seems like we are already 2 years in this, but it's still having a technical challenge. I just want to say that we don't make land acknowledgement for the sake of historical footnote, but it's really important a reminder that our commitment to true and lasting reconciliation with Indigenous people. And we see that as we move away from this pandemic into long-term recovery, the questions all government would be asking is, what how do we play a critical role ensuring that all communities have what they need to their day-to-day activity and long-term solutions. But in terms of equity, I think sometimes the word itself might sound abstract, and just to break it down is that it really, as earlier was alluded, it's a way of seeing how we do business day to day, and asking the questions, and who benefits from the city services or programs or initiatives, and through our actions and decisions we make, are there people that are left behind, or are there people that are not included, and have we done any harm or any positive outcome for the people, and what will be are we putting certain neighborhoods and communities more burden and others entrenching the certain privileges further? And what is the working with the people who are impacted on issues, and how do we work with them and bring their experience? So I think when we talk about equity lenses, equity framework, it all comes to that, seeing where does the power lie, and how we make the decision. And I think that is where it comes to using those lenses in grants, budgets, city services, so that we can create a more equitable and healthier community. For example, let's say that if a city, and regardless if you're a small city or big city, if you conduct a review lenses through your financial planning, and I think that could be an excellent idea to start with. And the point is that it all comes to asking, seeing what are the future adversity impacts of City Hall on certain community members, and making that right. And I think at the end of the day, it comes to that. So for instance, if the public fund, which is a broader group of services, do some neighborhoods benefit from another? Do some groups of people in our community have been and currently left out of those services? And what does it look like being in a part of a community who lives together and making sure that our public assets are welcoming and available for everyone? And I think when we speak on that, we are really trying to address those issues. And the question comes to then, how do you do it? And what steps do you take? And for instance, for us, just to speak about City of Victoria, and in 2018, when the new council came, and there was a lot of neighborhoods that were pushing for this. So there is one specific neighborhood where there was a pool, and this is the only pool that we have in the city, and one of the biggest pool, which is publicly city-run pool. And there was a discussion for replacement. So the design didn't include a lot when it comes to affordability, and really embedded equity and seeing who, if we are investing a lot of money, what the pool will look like and who will benefit that long term. And this is how our equity framework begin, where we, me, myself, and another councillor brought a motion where we changed our bylaw so that the neighborhood associations could come and present in front of the council as staff. And it was at the beginning unfair that the residents had to do a long report and show where are the low income people live, what are the income. So they brought data showing that who lives in those neighborhoods, and seniors, single mothers, low income, immigrant, indigenous, which areas are they more concentrated, and what services they have. So that is how our equity framework begins. So I will leave it there, and I will come back to the second question.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think that was actually a really good segue into the question number 2, which is really around community, and how do you get community involved in your DEI journey? What are some of the challenges in terms of doing this kind of groundwork, and what insights can you provide our audience today in terms of what this type of collaboration actually takes when you're kind of in the middle of all of it, and you're trying to bring along your council colleagues, you're trying to bring along your community members, you're trying to move along, the administration infrastructure. That's like a lot of moving parts that you're all trying to do in tandem. So I'm as moderator, I also get to be timekeeper. So I'm going to ask all of our panelists to maybe keep their answers to about 2.5 minutes, just so we can ensure that we also get to question number 3. So Lindell, why don't I turn it over to you for this one?
Thank you. And I just put my 2-minute timer on for you. Shamarki, that was really great because you're allowing me to segue pretty easy to how the community has to be involved in all the work that we do. Because one, as elected officials, we are elected by the community, but also our communities are the ones that are driving our municipalities, our counties, our cities, wherever you're representing. And if we're not bringing them on board to be a part of the process, when we create the process, they're not going to be on board because they weren't part of it. So when I think of the work that we've done here in HRM, around our anti-Black racism, around our work around diversity and inclusion, around our work around accessibility, around our work around indigenous issues and supports, it all came down to us humbling ourselves as a government, saying, you know what, we're actually not really great at doing this work. And we've messed up in the past. In a great example of Africville, and if you're not familiar with Africville, I recommend you look up the story of Africville, a Black community that was turned into a dump, and that was the city's fault. And eventually we apologized for that work and have started to do some work on reconciliation with that community and its descendants. And actually it's in my background here, an interpreter panel that tells a story about it. But all that to say is without the community knowing that we're doing it in a meaningful way, but also humbling ourselves to say, yes, we're not great, but we are here to support you, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's what I would say for folks. It's really approaching that work, understanding that using your track record, using what I have done as a government is not always the way to approach it. It's really, what do you want us to do? And then we can take it behind the scenes and figure out what can be done. So thank you very much. And my timer's gone off. And if for folks who are here, if I disappear, it's because we're in budget and I got a message that we're voting soon. So if I disappear, I'll leave my information in the chat, and if folks have questions, they can reach out. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Lindell. That's the real life stories are definitely very, very helpful. Sheila, why don't I turn it over to you to talk to us a little bit about what this is looking like in Ottawa?
Thank you so much. And I do want to segue from what Lindell was saying, because I actually grew up in Nova Scotia. And very recently for Black History Month, I wrote an article that features Africville in it. So just wanted to, say that as a little bit of my past. In Ottawa, so from an internal point of view, as an employee of the City of Ottawa, the employees are continually learning and continually listening from the public, from the residents. So we do that both informally and formally. For our strategies, for instance, like our anti-racism strategy and our women and gender equity strategy, we have town halls or consultations where we invite members of the public to come and speak to us about their priorities, what they need to see done by the city. And I think that's really, really important in shaping that strategy before it's launched. We also internally have something called the Community Champions Table Network, the CCTN. And that's made up of 20 representatives from different organizations and communities in Ottawa. And they come, we meet with them quarterly. So once every 4 times a year, and they bring to us issues of the community or trends or what their memberships are going through. And we share with them our responses. So here's our initiative, what are we doing with, for example, strategic hiring processes? How are we going to make hiring processes more accessible to them and easier for them, user-friendly, so that we can diversify our workforce? We also talk to them about outreach and recruitment strategies. We talk to them about new policies we're doing and so on. So there's always a back and forth with the community. The other thing is we have sort of larger ways that we speak to the community. And that is with, we have an accessibility advisory group that informs about accessibility. We have a French language services committee, advisory committee. For our official plan, which is the big consultation we do for city planning, we go out to the community and we adopt an equity lens. So those are some of the ways we keep in touch with the community. But I would agree 100% that the community is the heart of what we're doing and we have to be responsive.
Great, thank you, Sheila. I definitely do take from there this idea that community pulls, and they're the ones that if you can be nimble and responsive, I think it just makes for a better city and a place where people feel heard. So, Sharmarke, over to you then for question number 2, please.
Thanks, Salima. And it's very interesting to hear, and I'm very happy that Ottawa has a hiring strategy in terms of attracting diverse workforce. And I think that is a very crucial in terms of when it comes to equity and inclusion, to really do internal and external equity folks. For instance, the importance of having diverse workforce with a different experience, because diversity is not only the makeup of the skin, but it's different walks of experience and realities. So, for instance, this might not be the it might be unpopular opinion. But the planning profession at the city, in any city, requires high educational standards, and the profession selects for people who are more privileged in terms of the education you have, the standards of the field, and sometimes, and when you had all those privileges, then maybe certain lived experiences is far from you, and that would increase a bit of empathy, of having more empathy, the ways of people live, because if you have never lived in those experiences, perhaps sometimes you might miss a bit of that empathy. So diversity of the city staff in any field affects people's experience when they interact with City Hall, and when City Hall makes decisions that directly impacts them. So ensuring that City Hall represents the diversity of the broader community in terms of life experience, especially in all equity considerations, means that as a City Hall will work better for the entire community, and it's less likely to make decisions and have a system process that discriminate. The more diverse workforce at all levels of seniority also means community members can see themselves in leadership and hope have more trust in the City Hall. And I think it all starts from there. Then it will be much easier then to work with the public and have all those engagement when you have in-house reflection on how being in the makeup of the city. So actually that increases more trust, and you will need less consultants outside because you have more expertise in-house in terms of that. So I think that is important. And for here at City of Victoria, we just begin this work in terms of equity. So we have a lot of moving parts. We have accessibility framework. We have welcome city strategy, which is crucial because immigration is a big in our country, and really having the long-term and newly immigrants enhancing that, and the socioeconomic. We have a transgender, non-binary, and two-spirit inclusion plan. We have childcare action plan, senior strategy action plan, youth strategy, Victoria housing strategy, climate leadership plan, engagement framework. But But the question is how all these silos could, the equity framework, how could it bring all together so that it doesn't become a silo and become as a whole? Because when I interact with the city hall, I don't want any government to see part of me and leave other part of me. So how do we see the city community members as a whole? And when we're making decisions, how do we make as a whole? So and the framework will come soon, and I look forward to that. And I hope that as we begin this journey, which is a long process beyond this council and the next council, because this is a journey, but I really look forward. And just to conclude, the community, and we sometimes it's unfair to put a lot of pressure on the community in terms of expecting. And we know that who shows up at council meetings. If I'm single mother with 4 children, 3 jobs, I might not even know where the city hall is. So we have to go where the communities are and not wait the communities to come to us. And what I have witnessed a lot is that communities organizing themselves and pushing us, sometimes. So hopefully when we have all these strategies, and we are updating also our engagement strategy, and I'm excited about that. So that will really help bring in different experiences to direct us. And just to conclude, right now I'm proud that all the committees are more diverse in the city of Victoria than before. So now every appointees we make sure that there is a diverse experience. That also helps how we make decisions.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe I'll add just a minute here about Edmonton's experience. Mayor Sohi got elected back in October, and he says this one line, which I think is so critical, where he says, we need to start treating lived experience as expertise. And I think that's so true, right? As city administration, we hire so much different type of expertise, whether it's engineers or public engagement professionals, or pick something. But this idea of your own lived experience being a source of expertise, I thought was is really critical. And we've been really lucky. I think in Edmonton, we've had a bit of a sea change in terms of our city council. We now have a majority are women, which is fantastic. Representation from the Indigenous community and also from visible minority communities. And you know what? It does make a difference. I think when people can see themselves in council, and then that's then in turn reflected in senior administration and all the way down, it does make a difference. I do see one of the questions in here is just around, what's the difference between building a structure from top down versus ground up? I'm happy to address that. In Edmonton, I would say we turned the dial a little bit. Our DEI strategy has been in place for about 3 years now. But recently, so Mayor Sohi's first motion was around developing an anti-racism motion, or an anti-racism strategy. We took that to council on February 14th. And this was very much community led. So we have an anti-racism advisory committee, and they are the ones who led this. And it really, I think, highlighted maybe the unseen barriers when you're working in administration that we sometimes put up, whether it's around engagement, some of our report timelines, right? We have to turn around reports in 12 weeks. It's really hard to do authentic engagement in 12 weeks. And that's something that we heard. Also in terms of remuneration, we ask a lot of our volunteers, and a lot of people have to do this without actually getting any remuneration. So that's something that we're looking at quite closely right now. And I'm proud to say all of our equity serving committees do get remunerated right now, but I still think there's more to do. So happy to chat more about the Edmonton experience, but conscious of the time. So with our 2 panelists left, I think what I'll do is, why don't we talk a little bit about the impacts? So, I think one of the things, we always talk about the challenges when it comes to DEI and anti-racism work. We don't usually get the space to talk about like just the positive impacts. It is hard work. It can sometimes be messy work, but I think the benefits in terms of community cohesion and sense of belonging far outweigh any of the time that each of us put into this. So maybe Sheila, I'll turn it over to you to talk to us a little bit about how are you finding that community members are responding and adapting to the inclusivity mandate? And how have you noticed that they've become stronger as a result?
Well, I want to just pick up with something you said that's happening at City of Edmonton, and that is the idea that diversity and intersectionality is an expertise, right? Because that's also what we're doing at the City of Ottawa with our Lead It strategy, which is our innovative strategic hiring process. We're looking at the idea that the lived experience you bring to the city is actually an asset, right? Just like a different language is an asset that you're bringing. And so as we do see our numbers rising in terms of the 4 employment equity groups and our representation getting healthier and healthier, I think one of the things that is really important is that when we hire people who are diverse, people from socioeconomic disadvantaged communities, women and gender diverse individuals, persons with disabilities, we are actually putting a paycheck into their pocket, but pension and benefits and a quality of living. And I think that sometimes we lose that importance, that critical piece, that hiring diversity means you're actually also investing in, families to survive, but also their second generations to go to, further education and so on. So that's really important. In terms of the impacts, of course, at the City of Ottawa, we are also funding numerous organizations and communities. We're building their capacity through funding programs. And so they're getting impacted in just the ability for them to be able to develop their ability to grow, to create their own services farther and farther afield. We have something called the Neighborhood Ambassadors Program, where youth are carrying information and helping communities, helping their own communities embrace change and have cohesion. So that's another way that we are making an impact. And then with all of our different policies, when we apply that equity lens, we're also influencing our partners. So whether they're business partners or education or different agencies like our public health or our police force or so on. So I'll give you an example. When you apply an equity lens on a policy such as social procurement, you're looking at that value, right? Social value added. So we're trying to encourage, people that we might contract to start thinking about diversity, hiring diversity. What are your policies that you have in place? And that creates a priority, right? So we like to think of that influence around diversity and inclusion. The community is advocating to us to do better, which we need to do. And then we're in return, we're trying to respond by influencing out as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent point, and maybe a topic for a future conversation. But I think the role of a municipality in terms of providing leadership in this space for other institutions in the city writ large. Sharmarke, I'm going to give you 1 minute to wrap us up, and then we'll just do some final comments and make sure that we can get everybody out of here by 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, noon Eastern, and various timeframes from there. So Sharmarke, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm one-term city councillor, and when I ran, I had all these ideas and visions, and excited. And to be honest, once I got into the government, one thing that became clear for me is if you don't understand the capacity and the structure of your organization, sometimes it's very hard. All the council might have, how could they align with the vision of the senior staff? And I think that is a very important, and it goes back to that collaborative work. And another thing is, you cannot have equity and inclusion and diversity if you don't put resources and money in terms of that. So one of the things it took a while, but is now we have an office with the staff, and hopefully all those strategies we have will not go to the shelf, and then there will be staff that is doing that work. So I think one important thing I would leave is invest in your staff and put more money, resources, and expertise, and make sure that you have that in-house expertise that you are able to deliver all the action plans you have. But just to conclude, in Victoria, one of the things now when we had our strategic plan grants, we used, although we didn't have equity framework until now, but we used equity values so that our strategic grant goes with that. And just to conclude, what more important now is that the appointed committees will be, will have diversity. We have even UN decade people of African descent. We give incentive, and now we established internal community of practice to develop internal capacity and equity-centered decision making. And engagement is going on in terms of community conversations for the EDI office, and the engagement equity framework is being updated. So all this work is really beginning, and I'm excited the journey that my city and my community is taking. But I hope that we put more resources and time and those, so that this is on councils to come.
Great, thank you. I think that's a great note to end on. And I think, if there's one thing you took away from today, every effort in this space is important. So regardless of where you are on the journey, whether you're just starting out, you're much further down the trajectory, I think they're all really critical. These are critical conversations that are really going to have an impact for generations. So thank you for joining us today. There's definitely an appetite to continue having this conversation. I've been seeing lots of different tools that people have been posting in the chat. So we'll definitely try and capture that and send them back to all of you. But thanks again so much for joining us. FCM, thank you so much for hosting us in the background. I know technology is not always the easiest, but I think you did an incredible job. And for all of our audience, thanks for joining us. And to all of our panelists, thanks so much for sharing your insight. And with that, we will see you at the next FCM recording. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.